Welcome back to pixelprojectradio. This is part 3 of the Final Fantasy IX revisit on the show. Part 3 of 4 of this mini-series. And once again, Eric from the Unlockables Podcast is joining me, the definitive Kingdom Hearts podcast, and also a massive Final Fantasy IX fan. Eric, thanks again for joining me, man.
Rick, I've been looking forward to doing this part 2 all week. Thank you so much for having me, and to everybody in the Pixel Project Radio community, thank you so much for the amazing response on the first episode, and thank you for tolerating me on a second episode here. It's really, really awesome to be doing this with you, Rick.
Likewise, man. The feeling is very mutual. If you haven't checked out the first 2 parts, please make sure to do that, because we are going to get right into the meat of it here. At the end of the last part, I mentioned that we were going to start by talking about picking up Quina and talk a little bit about the Chocobo Forest. Eric, which do you want to talk about first?
I would say let's talk about picking up Quina first, just because it's another party member.
Okay. You know, for the longest time as a kid, I thought Quina was optional.
See, I was going to ask you about that, because normally whenever I've played the game, I've always picked up Quina before going through Gizmo Grotto. So I've never done like that portion of the game and not having she/he with me. So I've never done that just because that's not the way I play the game, so.
Picking up Quina before Gizmo Grotto is the pro move, because it makes that fight with Master Gizmo so much easier. We talked about that last time, but yeah. You actually don't have to pick them up until you're getting ready to go to Fossil Roo, which we'll talk about today. Mm-hmm. But let's talk a little bit about picking up Quina. And by the way, Eric called Quina she/he. This game refers to Quina, since it's all in text, as S/he. Quina is part of a race called the Ku tribe, Q, I'm not really sure. And they are genderless. They don't have a gender. I don't know if it's significant at all that they didn't use they instead of S/he. I think it was probably just a choice between one or the other.
Yeah, I'd say probably back then, I don't know if the use of they was widely kind of adopted yet. Maybe you could speak in the Japanese a little in terms of the way the language goes about identifying a person as genderless or something like that. I don't know. So yeah, it might have just been that they was not that widely adopted yet.
I didn't actually look into the Japanese script, but in Japanese, you don't really have to identify gender at all. Typically, okay. Yeah, like if I were talking about you or to you to somebody and I wanted to say, oh, look at him, I wouldn't say him. I mean, they do have words for that, but generally they don't use pronouns in that way. They would either just drop it entirely because it's such a contextual language, or instead of saying him, they would say Eric,
Perfect.
So you could easily go through the script without referring to Quina in any sort of gender. Okay. In Japanese, that is. But for here, we're just probably going to say she/he or they. It's honestly not a big deal. But let's talk about Quina. Quina is the blue mage of the game, and the Q race themselves are gourmands. Their whole deal is they are food specialists, and for Quina, that's pretty much all they think about. Quina is, rotund is a pretty good word to describe Quina. Very round, light blue skin, wearing a sort of smock, like a cook smock, an apron with a little hat, and their characteristic look is that they've got these sort of small, very slender eyes and huge tongues.
I would say out of anything in Final Fantasy, probably one of the most unique designs for a race of beings, probably in the entire series. And honestly, kind of what you expect from a culture that is centered around food and experimenting and experiencing food. So it's quite striking the first time you see it. It's really unlike anything really in Final Fantasy.
Another cool thing is that they speak sort of in broken English. So not quite like Yoda, but they speak very much like, you have tasty, me want delicious food. Not cook enough for 11 people, maybe more come, maybe guests extra hungry, like things like that.
Yeah.
I used to hate Quina as a kid, but now that I'm an adult, I don't know. They're kind of one of the best party members you can have if you put the work into learning them, which is kind of like the trick for all blue mages in this series, right? I mean, Gao is another great example. Gao's not really a blue mage, but he works sort of similarly. Kimari is another one from FF10. Quistis,
that's what I was thinking of,
from FF8. If you put the work into these characters, they're pretty good. Quina's blue magic can be very, very powerful, especially early on. You can get abilities like Mighty Guard and Pumpkin Drop, which have the tendency to do a lot of damage or buffs. It's just a really great character all around.
The one that really comes in handy too, there are a couple of spots in the game where you're kind of like left without a white mage healing option, and one of the options that Quina has access to is, I think it's called White Wind, where it will heal your whole party. So it's a little bit annoying to try and get their spells because it requires you to essentially eat the enemy. You have to whittle them down, their health down enough, and select the eat command from Quina's options, and then they will consume the monster. And if it's a corresponding monster, they will gain some sort of ability from that monster.
Or if you have the luck of the Rick, they just say, "I know can't eat until weaker," and then you just accidentally kill it.
Same here. Yep, that's absolutely how it goes.
And so begins the merry-go-round of trying to get Quina's abilities. The way that we recruit Quina is by going into Q's Marsh, and we find Quina hunting for frogs. What we have to do is pick up a frog ourselves, and then Quina decides to just sort of tag along. You get to talk to Quina's master, Quail, who is another member of the Q tribe. Essentially, Quina's whole deal is they're too focused on food that they know, and Master Quail says that they need to get out and see the world. So that's really their entire impetus of being in our party. I don't think Quina is necessarily a bad character. They're probably one of the funniest, and they give a platform for other characters to be kind of in funny situations too, which is more than you can say about another character we'll meet today. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting part too, because like you said, you're going, if you don't pick up Quina on the way to Gizmo, Scrodo, and Burmese and stuff like that, you pick her up in the main arc of the second disc. Regardless of that, you learn something interesting about Vivi if he's with you, about Vivi if he's with you, in that when they leave Quail's shack, when essentially Quina officially joins your party, Vivi kind of like lingers for a moment and tells Zidane that Quail looks like his grandpa, and so Vivi will go back inside the hut and inquire to Quail if they knew Quan. And the Quail's like very taken aback by this. You can tell he's like, no, he's like, I've never heard of that name. I don't know this person at all. And it seems like, and there's just a little bit of interesting backstory you get there that is easy to miss in the game. And there's another point in the game too, where you can like visit where Vivi was raised, and you kind of pick up some more of that context. It's easy to kind of miss if you don't actually go looking for it. So just a little interesting, more tidbit in character development for Vivi there.
Yeah, good catch. I don't think we're going to get to Vivi's backstory involving Quan for this episode, but next episode we surely will. And that's pretty much Quina in a nutshell. We'll talk more about them as we go on. But Chocobo Forest is the other thing that I wanted to touch on before we get into the rest of the story. Chocobo Forest is this game-sprawling mini-game. It's how you get a Chocobo. For my money, I think Final Fantasy IX handles Chocobos better than any other game in the series so far. Definitely better than 7 and 10. I could not stand doing Chocobo stuff in 7 and 10. 8, I can't even remember if there were Chocobos in 8, to be quite
I don't remember
honest
Chocobos in 8. I can't remember, so.
But here, we go into Chocobo Forest, and we're helped by a Moogle. He sort of teaches us about Chocobos. We can call them with Geisel Greens, and this particular Chocobo, named Choco, obviously enough, is going to be ours throughout the game. We can play this little mini-game called Chocobo Hot or Cold. What do you think about hot and cold?
I've spent several playthroughs spending many hours playing Chocobo Hot and Cold. So there's just something about playing it that it has kind of like an addictive quality. Like the premise of the game is you will ride your chocobo in like this enclosed like forest space, and you will like peck on the ground, and based on what the chocobo's like text response is, it'll tell you if you're hot, if you're cold, if you're close to discovering something, or you're not. And so the premise is kind of like trying to pinpoint like where the item is, and based on the items and different things you dig up, you get like points and like a score, and your chocobo's beak will level up and allowing it to like dig faster and detect items from kind of like further away. So it's pretty in depth for like a simple game of hot and cold. I really like it.
Yeah. If you're not nearby, the chocobo will just say, "Queh." And then as you get closer, "Queh? Queh? Queh?"
And just all caps with exclamation points. Yeah, it's great. The visual text is great.
Luckily, you can use the speed up function, and it does not affect the timer. You only get, I think, 60 seconds. This minigame is how you find, among other items, what are called chocographs. And this is part of this minigame. It spawns across the whole game, across every continent in the game. And these chocographs are basically treasure maps. They give you a tiny little screenshot of where the treasure is hidden and some context clues. And then you have to go out into the world and find them. And when you find these, you're going to get treasure, you're going to get items. But after you get so many of them, Chocobo, or Choco, our Chocobo, gets transported to the Dream Chocobo world where he meets with the big Pooba Chocobo, Fat Chocobo. And it's basically a quest for Choco to find his home, right? And we'll maybe talk about that more in the final episode if we have time. But just know that that's an ongoing side quest all across the game. I'm in the midst of it right now. It's I'm not gonna lie, I'm using a guide just because I've done this before, man.
Yeah, same. But playing it through for like the first time, it's a really cool additional way for you to like interact with the map and the world, like encouraging you to like explore, to really think about what like the clues are telling you, to look at different areas you've been at in it, like certain angles and stuff. So it's a really cool way to like explore and appreciate the design of the overworld map, which is like, again, other than like traveling from town to town, it's not something that you think about too much.
Yeah, this game definitely rewards exploration in a number of different ways. And this side quest gives you an optional super boss, which I am going to fight at least, and we can talk about that next episode.
Godspeed, sir.
You want to get into the story?
Yeah, let's get into the story.
Let's start it on disc 2. So disc 2, we're starting off with Steiner and Garnet. Steiner is thinking to himself, Queen Braun would never start a war. It's all a misunderstanding. I need not concern myself with such matters. My only mission is to protect the princess. Steiner is still firmly in this sort of duty-bound arc.
Yeah, so we're kind of transitioning away from where we left the last story, which is really like a kind of a beatdown of Zidane and Freya and Vivi, and if you picked up Quina at the hands of Beatrix, and now we're kind of transitioning to see what Steiner and Garnet are doing. If you remember from the last episode, Garnet had basically drugged everyone's meal after the Festival of the Hunt so that her and Steiner could return to Alexandria to figure out what exactly is going on with Queen Braun in this war. So, they're currently en route by foot because if you remember, the gate was damaged during their aerial escape with the Black Waltzes. Yeah,
and our trek by foot takes us to the summit station, where we're going to wait for a train car to take us back to Alexandria. And while we're waiting there, we run into Marcus and Cinna. Of course, Steiner's not happy to see them. He's still chastising them for being thieves and blames them for everything that's happened. Marcus is actually going to Treno, so we board the train with him. That's sort of on our way.
Mm-hmm.
He thinks that he's found a cure for blank called the Super Soft. But as our car is going, it sort of hits something, and the conductor is trying to get everybody to stay calm, but he lets it loose that, it's some kind of demon with a pointy hat. So we have to go outside and check it out because, of course, this is Black Waltz number 3. It's back. This is the last time we're going to deal with this guy. It's completely disheveled, malfunctioning, only talking about his mission, and it leads into another fight with him. Mm-hmm. This is the fight, I think, where if Garnet is the only one alive, it will just attack itself, I think.
I've never had trouble with this fight to the point where that's happened, so I I don't know. It's not a particularly difficult fight.
Not really, no.
I do like the timing of it, though, because it just kind of reminds you, like, why you're returning to the castle, that these things are happening, right? The Black Waltz was originally enhanced Black Mage sent to bring Garnet back. So just kind of a subtle reminder there of, like, what actually this is all about.
Yeah. This is only after we defeat it, Garnet's desire to talk with her mother only deepens. She wants to figure out what's going on. So we arrive in Treno, the city of nobles. Treno is sort of similar to Jidoor and Zozo from Final Fantasy VI if you roll them into one. It's a city where the rich nobles come to flaunt their wealth and explore in Dionysus-like revelry, while the townsfolk there, many of them are criminals and thieves and thugs. So there's a high crime rate here. That's why the nobles don't make their homes here. They visit and then leave because it's a city that's known for being dangerous. And the music, which you're probably hearing right now, is so good. It's this slow sort of ragtime. I went onto YouTube today and listened to this at double speed, and it sounds just as good.
Ooh, I'm gonna have to do that. That sounds enticing. We're here because Garnet makes the decision that she wants to help Marcus. She feels like she owes it to Blank because Blank did help them all escape from the evil forest. And I really like that we kind of stop and take time to have this kind of little mini character arc with these three here, because, you know, the plot point with Blank, it could have very easily just been a thing where Marcus went and got Blank off screen. It's just like he gets to say, oh yeah, by the way, we went back and rescued Blank. So I think I really like that they devoted the little bit of time to, like, kind of tie up this loose end. It just, I don't know, it just fills out the story and makes it feel a little more full.
Yeah, I completely agree. In Treno, if you're looking to get all of the ATEs and get that achievement, there are lots of missable ones here, so it is advisable to use a guide so you don't miss any of them. Mm-hmm. There are also at least one, maybe a couple Stellatios here. That's a side quest where you gather these coins that are based on the Zodiac, and you can give them to a duck lady that collects them, and she'll give you rewards. It's definitely worth your time to do that. But our plan now is to locate the noble that has the super soft, and we're going to steal it. Steiner hates this plan, but while he and Marcus are arguing, Garnet just walks away. And once Steiner notices, Marcus does the same. So we get some exploring time here.
And I really like this. It gives all the characters kind of time to explore, because one of the ATE scenes you get is with Garnet, and Garnet's still kind of, she's learning more about the world, but she's still a little bit naive. Like one of the ATE scenes, she like literally gets mugged by a guy, and so just kind of, yeah, and it really just kind of reinforces like what you were saying about the city. Like it's this very like rich opulence, but it's built on this criminal underworld where it's like, yes, rich people do come here, but the scummiest people just make their living here on stealing and ripping people off.
Yeah, the ATEs here are great. Yeah. Definitely try and get them if you are using a guide, especially. Mm-hmm. Once Steiner does find Garnet, they head to a local pub where Marcus, along with Beku, have located the noble in question that has the super soft, and they're off to steal it. The whole way, Steiner is protesting this. It's his duty to protect the princess from undesirables. This is where Beku pops in and he says, "You're always talking about your duty. Ain't you got any thoughts of your own?" And then they set sail to, in this tiny little boat, to the noble that has the super soft. And we get this little interlude, this little reverie where we get to see the inner monologues of Steiner and Garnet. And Steiner says the following: "What am I doing? I'm assisting thieves in committing a crime. No, I must be patient. Protect the princess. Escort her back to the castle. Focus on your duties. Trust the queen. She would never commit an atrocity. There must be a reason. No thoughts of my own. Nonsense. How can I, a lowly knight, understand the queen's thinking?" I know we talk a lot about Steiner's arc in this series, and I know it can seem like we're really hammering this in heavily, but it's just because it's set up so well, and this game is really adept at keeping its writing. I mean, first of all, I don't remember if we've said this before, but the dialogue in general in this game is really, really good. Up until this point, it's easily the best written Final Fantasy in terms of dialogue. The story, you can argue whatever, but dialogue-wise, fantastic. But almost all of the dialogue is so focused on the characters' arcs or the story. It's very focused in that way. There's not a lot of superfluous fluff like there was in 7 and 8. It's really good. It's really good.
It would be easy to get bogged down in that, right? Make it seem like, but it does such a great job of balancing all the characters' arcs while advancing the overall narrative for it. It's such a well balanced, like you said, and regardless, like some point, like where the plots go, like most of the characters have pretty consistent growth across the series. And Baku's one little offhanded comment that was just kind of like a jab really psychologically kind of fucked with Steiner's thinking, because he's literally standing on the front of the boat, kind of having a mini existential crisis now. And he's just like, listen, he's like, we just got to get through this. If this is what it takes to get the princess home, like fine, I'm willing to go along with it for now.
So we end up getting to the item shop where we have located this particular noble. I'm still, to this day, I'm not really sure why this noble was here, because they have their own house that we're going to go to in a minute. But this noble in question is Dr. Tot, Garnet's childhood tutor. We've got to get out of this shop because the shop owner hears them. So Dr. Tot says, hey, I live in the observatory in Treno. Let's go.
Yeah, I believe the excuse he gave the shopkeeper was that he was there for ink, but
why would he be there at like midnight? You know?
Hey, when the creative urge strikes you, you got to get some ink, you know?
You got to write about whatever he writes about.
Right.
We don't really get to know that. There is a great running gag that we see here with Baku talking about Dr. Tot, where he just continually refers to him as Dr. Toot or Dr. Ted or Dr. Tootsie.
It's so good.
Every single time, Marcus will have a little dialogue box that says ... It's Tot. Every single time. It cracks me up on every playthrough. It's
one of the best bits in the game. It's so good.
So we go to his observatory and we get the super soft. He hands it over willingly. Like he wants to help. And we tell him everything that's happened. He is on our side. He says, I'm on your side no matter what, to Garnet. He knows about what's going on with Queen Braun and how she's been acting erratically. So he agrees to take us down to this old transportation device to get us back to Alexandria quickly and discreetly. And that device is located in what's called Gargan Rue, a system of underground tunnels with some of the coolest music in the game.
It's very wacky. I hope you put it in here because it's very good.
Oh yeah, I'll put it in here. It's great. This device is basically a tunnel. It's an underground tunnel system that involves taming this wild creature called a gargant, which is basically a giant insect. They crawl upside down on the ceiling, and what Tot has done is he has created paths, and he tames them with food, with their natural food. It's like a flower, is like a weed kind of deal. And he's attached a carriage to its back. So it's hanging upside down. The carriage is hanging off of its back. We tame it with food, and it takes us where we need to go. Terrific. Before they set off, this is another Steiner quote, and I'm sorry, I know, heavy hammering, but I'm going to do it anyway. Tot says something along the lines of, like, you know, Steiner, what are you going to do? Like, what are your thoughts on this? And Steiner says, I am a humble knight. I cannot exceed my authority. To which Dr. Tot replies, you may endanger the princess if you keep telling yourself that.
Ugh.
I think it's just one line, but it hammers this point home really well, that morality is not black and white.
Right, and adhering to a unflexible, strict code like the relationship between a knight and their queen, when your objective is to protect the person that you care about. It's like, what if to do that job, you have to go against what your moral rigid structure is? That's kind of the dynamic that we're setting up here for Steiner, that he's going to have to face like relatively quickly coming up here.
It's a theme that we see Sakaguchi put into a lot of his games, right? This idea that austerity is detrimental. It provides diminishing returns the harder you cling on to it. Right. And Steiner embodies that completely. So after taking down a little mini boss on the way, we get into a little scuffle. We reach the underground of Alexandria Castle. Garnet tries here to explain to Steiner that it was used to prevent invasions in the past, but he cuts her off. He doesn't want to hear any of it. We've got to hurry. We've got to get to Queen Braun. Of course, though, we fall prey to those preventive measures. We get sort of trapped in this little cage type thing. The floors, walls shoot up from the floors and that cages us in. It's Zorn and Thorn's doing. They have been ordered to arrest us, literally all of us, including Garnet, and take us to Braun.
Tricky little guys. And I do really like this part of the game because it does something, and maybe this just might be my interpretation of it, but the whole time, like, we have the knowledge and information of like what Queen Braun is actually doing. It's Steiner and Garnet as the characters that don't have that information. So while Steiner and Garnet are making their way to Alexandria, the whole time as the player, we're like, this is really bad. This is not going to end well. This is the last place you want to be going. And I always really like how games set up that kind of like dichotomy between like the characters in the game not knowing the information going towards an objective and the player being like, hey, we know this information. It's not going to end well for these characters. And I think that the game, again, it does it beautifully here and sets up just the next amazing part of this game.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to push us along just a little bit. We're back with Zidane, Vivi, Freya, and Quina. We're going to head to Clara. Or if you're me, we're going to catch more frogs to get Quina's ultimate weapon.
Yes, always catch more frogs. There's always time to catch more frogs.
Remember, we're going to Clara because the Burmesians were under attack from Alexandria, and many of them fled to Clara, or as many as possible. Clara is this settlement that's situated on the branches and landings of this massive tree, and all of it is surrounded by a desert sandstorm. A sandstorm, dust storm, I'm not sure if there's a term for that.
I believe that they refer to it as the storm, but it's some kind of like dust storm or sandstorm type thing. But it really makes, which kind of is weird because they're like, oh, because of the storm, nobody can approach it, but we're able to begin our ascent up the tree just fine. Maybe it's easier in smaller groups as opposed to like a massive army. Don't know. But yeah, it's supposed to prevent people from reaching the settlement, which is higher up the trunk of the tree.
That was what I assumed too. With less people, it's easier to get up. But
right.
This sandstorm, we learn, is powered by a magic harp and dance rituals. We'll learn more about that in a bit here. The remaining Burmesians have sought refuge here. The king of Burmesia is here, and he was expecting Freya. So as Freya and the king meet, we get to explore, and we get some ATEs to go through.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, one of the ATEs, we can see that the Burmesians and the Clarins here are not happy to see Vivi. They call him a pointy-headed devil and a bastard. Even the children are like shouting, bastard, bastard, bastard at him. Right. It's funny in a very tragic kind of way.
Because as far as they know, they've seen people like Vivi just come and basically destroy their homes. So it's not entirely Vivi's fault. How else are they supposed to react? But yeah, it's still right. Vivi, who's already had a really rough time of it, just getting emotionally bludgeoned.
Oh, and there will be more of that.
Yes.
So after we explore for a little bit, we learn that the antlion, a beast that lives like right next door in the desert, is attacking one of the children of the settlement. And it turns out that child is Puck. Prince Puck, it turns out. Wouldn't you know it? Puck is a prince. Who would have thought? We take care of the antlion. It's not really a difficult boss. His opening attack will bring your HP completely down, so you've got to come back from that. But otherwise, it's a very manageable fight. Puck afterwards, he's okay now. He decides he doesn't really want to talk to his dad, so he runs off. And Vivi wants to talk to him, so he runs after him. We go to the king, and we fill him in on what's going on with Alexandria. So it's decided that they'll hold a dance ritual to strengthen the sandstorm for protection. Freya joins in on this. I think it's a little weird. The justification is like, she wants to defend her people. She feels like she failed Burmesia, so she does not want to fail protecting Clara. I still think it's a little weird to highlight this dance ritual so strongly and have Freya at the forefront of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you think?
I think the justification, like I understand it too, and I think the king's requests, I think the king specifically asked her to be a part of it because he's like, oh, with a dragon knight taking part in the ritual, it'll strengthen the storm like even more to like more powerful than it's ever been before. And I kind of look at it as, you know, Freya's been off obviously on her arc trying to find Sir Fratley. It's kind of part of her story, and I think she does feel guilty about not being there when her home was attacked. So I think this is kind of a justification of her way to try and be like, even if it's not something she would normally do, like she's like, yeah, I'll do whatever it takes to protect this place because I it's kind of like I failed protecting Burmecia, I won't fail here. So like I get it, but it is a pretty extensive kind of dance scene. I love the song that goes with it. I think the song's great, but yeah, it's like a couple minutes long.
It is a little longer than you'd expect.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, at the completion of this, the harp strings snap, which is a very, very bad omen.
Mm-hmm.
This, unfortunately, causes the sandstorm to completely die, leaving Clara defenseless for the first time in 1,000 years. Not good.
Not
but
good.
We are sort of left hanging on that because we're going back briefly to Steiner and Marcus. They are. It just shows that they're imprisoned like canaries in a cage. Garnet, though, she is determined to figure out why Queen Braun is acting so strange. And when they get to meet face to face, at first Braun seems very kind and concerned. So Garnet asks her outright, were you behind the destruction of Burmecia? And she says, no, you've got it all wrong. Those Burmecian rats have been plotting to destroy Alexandria for some time. So I had no choice but to take initiative. This queen with an army at her disposal, attacking Burmecia, a town that does not have nearly the amount of means that Alexandria has.
Mm-hmm.
It's bullshit, and you can smell it from a mile away. And so does Garnet. I mean, you can choose to believe her or not. You get the option, but it doesn't really matter what you say because shortly after, Kuja comes in. And he's still talking like he does. And I think even Garnet's like, what are you talking about?
Yes, very, very dramatic, treating it like it's almost like a play, right? Being played out before him, like he does. And he does come in, he ends up putting Garnet to sleep, and Braun gives the orders to Zorn and Thorn to, what happens next is to extract her Eidolons. And this is kind of the first time in the story that we touch on this aspect of Garnet, right? It's always been whenever she's been in your party, she's had the option in her menu to summon, but she's never had like enough MP or been able to do that. And it's really, this is like the first time we kind of touch on it, that she has this ability to summon these beings. But this was the plan all along. They had to wait till she was 16 in order to like extract the ability to summon these Eidolons from her. And I know it says in your notes here, it's not sure if this is explained. I don't think it's 100% explained. I think we get more clarification on it later on, but not really at this point.
What, like why 16 is the age?
Yeah, not exactly sure. Or if it's just like, 16, that's just when, like, it's a big number, so sure.
Yeah. So we're back now in Clara with our crew. We head down the trunk because we just want to see if the enemies are invading, and sure enough, we find Alexandrian soldiers, but only a few of them. It turns out this was just a diversion put together by Beatrix, and we see her. She comes in and she says, oh, they fell for it.
Yes.
Puck will find us, and he says, hey, you've got to come back now. The settlement is in big trouble. Mages and soldiers are running rampant in the settlement, slaughtering Burmecians and Clarans alike. We do what we can to help. We get several choices here to direct the civilians. We can say go left, go right. You get an achievement for doing this called Out of Harm's Way. The way to direct them is go right, next option go left, next option go right, and then when the kids ask you if it's safe, you have to say no. The village is not safe yet. You also get some nice items for doing that too. So it's not just about the achievement.
I normally have to look that up just because I can never remember exactly what it is. Like I've done it before. I don't remember what the exact order is.
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's no way to know. There are so many like little mini games, quote unquote, where you're not given any context. You just kind of have to choose.
Right.
And none of them are consequential. So it's fine. You don't miss out on any missable items or anything, but it's still nice to have that extra elixir when the time comes.
Yeah, and making the wrong choices too is devastating, because if you direct them wrongly, like sometimes the black mages will warp down and literally kill the people you just directed to go that way. It's very devastating.
Well, that's exactly what happens here. After this is all said and done, if you directed them to the right areas, they'll survive, and then they give you gifts like items. So we get the remaining survivors to the cathedral, and we get surrounded by black mages, but we hear this mysterious voice ring out from up above, and someone jumps down and just slices the mages with no problem at all. It's Sir Fratley.
He's so cool.
He's so cool.
He's so cool.
Freya is finally reunited with him. She gets to speak with him. And she says, I climbed the highest mountains only to hear rumors of your victories. I searched the deepest valleys only to find your footsteps. But there's a problem. He doesn't know who she is. He says something to the effect of, Freya, you say? I believe this is the first time we've met.
Devastating.
Yeah, Puck comes in to explain. He found Sir Fratley in his travels, and he didn't remember Puck either. He's totally amnesiac. But when he heard that the Burmesians and the Clarens were in danger, these faint memories came back of his duty as a dragon knight. But that's it. That's all he remembers. It's really tragic, man, after she's been searching for her lost love for years, and, in a way, he's dead. He's right in front of her, but he is also dead.
Which is almost worse than him actually just being dead. And it again, this arc that Freya's been on over the end of the last disc and the beginning of this one is just, she's gone through a lot. She left her duty in her home to search for this man. And, just kind of the timing of her returning to Lindblum for the Festival of the Hunt and this happening, she's probably dealing with a lot of conflicting emotions and a lot of guilt of leaving her home. And this happens to her home. And now the man that she left her home to find doesn't remember who she is at all. It's just, devastating.
It really is. And this is why I will forever say that Freya's character arc should not have ended here. It basically ends here.
Yeah, it should have been much longer.
She deserved so much better. Fratley leaves at this point. He still has things that he needs to do. And Freya just sort of laughs, and she says, what irony. To find the man about whom I have dreamt endlessly, only to discover that he cannot even remember who I am. So for now, she does the tactic to put off dealing with this trauma by putting the duty to defend her people at the forefront, and she'll process this in time.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's such a shame that they did not develop this further.
I agree with you, because, like you said, after we get kind of past this part, Freya's story kind of takes a back seat, and this situation really isn't revisited until the end of the game.
We don't have much time now, though, because Beatrix shows up, and she steals the harp's jewel. But she's pretty upfront about it. She says, this is the only reason why I'm here. I don't have any other business with you other than taking this jewel. But of course, we're not going to let that fly. So we get into another battle with her, and just like last time, it's unwinnable. After about 10 turns or so, she ends the fight with Clim Hazard or Stock Break, defeats us again, and she orders the mages to withdraw. And they do it via those teleportation portals that the mages kind of come in through. And in a moment of quick thinking, Zidane says, I'm going after them. And one by one, everybody jumps in to go get them. Except for Quina. If Quina's with you, they say that they don't like heights, and they just run away.
Classic Quina move. Now, can I ask you here, because I kind of held off from my thoughts about it in the last episode because we were running long, but the Beatrix fights, we have the second Beatrix fight that is scripted and unwinnable. Do you feel any certain kind of way towards that, or is it just like, oh, this is kind of part of the story?
No, I like them. I think it would be worse if we won the battle, took her HP down to 0.
Right.
And then, after the battle, we get a cutscene of her winning. Because that happens all the time, but that's not what's happening here. We lose the battle. We can't win. Even if you somehow manage to get her HP to 0, and I tested this. I put on the little cheat to do 999 damage. If you take her down to 0, it's the same outcome. She says, enough of this, and then she ends it. I don't have a problem with this at all.
Yeah, I only say that because I highlighted this when I did a solo episode a long time ago on parts of Final Fantasy that I really liked. So I really like these fights with Beatrix because, you know, one of the games I contrast this with is Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 does this all the time in the way you just mentioned, the wrong way, where you're allowed to lower the boss's HP to 0, and then and then you basically lose the fight in the cutscene. And I'm like, I just don't like the way that is, because it kind of cheapens the value of a boss fight if you're like winning these fights, but then just in the following cutscene you lose, and it's like nothing I did really matters. But I just really like that this is a way. It's Beatrice is established in the first disc as like this famed warrior, this general that is like that her skill and prowess is above anybody else, really in the continent, and it's just a really awesome way in game with an amazing. I love the Wavering Blade so much. It's such a great song to show that she really is. She, no matter what you do, you can't beat her. She outclasses you in every possible way. And it really kind of, as we're about to see in the next scene here, kind of is in stark contrast to like her starting her own kind of character arc development here as to what she's about to go through. So I think the Beatrix fights are so well done. A great example of, yes, unwinnable fights can be done incorrectly, but if they're done correctly, they can really add such an effect to the story. This is like one of my top favorite parts of the games are the showdowns with her. So good.
Yeah, well said, man. I agree completely. And we'll see more of her pretty soon. Like you just said, in this scene, we sort of start to build her character out.
Right.
Because we teleported with the mages, we're now on the Red Rose.
Bold move.
We see, yeah, really bold move. Braun is in possession of the dark matter, which was extracted from Garnet, who is now, quote, useless to her. And she wants to test to see if Kuja's claims are true. She is going to attempt to summon an Eidolon, and that Eidolon is Odin. So we get this FMV of Braun summoning Odin from the heavens. He rides down on his steed and uses his Zantetsuken to just obliterate Clara. Destroys everything. It's not subtle. It's very clearly wiping out any trace of life that may have been left there.
It is a spectacle of a FMV too. I mean, watching this scene in 2023, 2024, all these years later, like this was in a game in the year 2000, and it looks fantastic. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's really well done. It highlights the destruction of these Eidolons, and that's typical of Sakaguchi. These are a parallel, sort of an allegory to weapons of mass destruction, right?
Right.
You know, wars were going on at the time when this was, you know, being created. It's not, you know, Sakaguchi puts the anti-war theme in so many of his games, and we're going to see more of that maybe in this episode, but certainly in this game. Freya, well, Zidane, Vivi, and Freya, they all land on the Red Rose, and it's revealed they saw this whole thing. Freya is devastated. She can barely speak or move. But Beatrix lands too. So we go to hide and we do some eavesdropping, and we hear Beatrix say this: "My troops alone would have been more than enough to take Clara. Why does the Queen insist on using black mages and Eidolons? I didn't train all of these years so I could take a back seat to anyone." Then some mages get onto the telepod after Braun orders them to, and Beatrix continues, "There's no difference between them and me. We're all just blindly following orders. My heart and my will mean nothing. Maybe Steiner was right." And then Braun will later take the jewel from Beatrix that she took from the harp and doesn't even say so much as thank you. It's great. We're seeing this character that is supposed to be feared, and we're seeing them humanized here, which is something that a lot of lesser games wouldn't do. They don't bother to humanize the antagonistic characters, especially ones that aren't the big bad, right? And
right.
I love that we're doing this here. Beatrix is one of my favorite characters in this game.
Yes,
I really,
100%.
really like Beatrix. You know what? I really wish, we're going to meet a character later named Amaranth, but I wish Beatrix would have just been a party member instead.
I agree with you 100%. and this scene is made all the more shocking because all of our encounters with Beatrix so far have just been like, she's cold, calculated, and this like unstoppable. And this happens literally moments after she just kicked our asses again in another fight. So it's really shocking to we just experienced the cold, calculating side of Beatrix, and now moments later we're getting this reflection where she's starting to go down a similar path that Steiner's going down, where she's just like, but she's getting to it much more quickly than Steiner, right? She's like my heart, my will mean nothing. We're just blindly following orders. Like, oh, it's just, man, it leaves me speechless sometimes. Like, it's so good.
Yeah, well, Steiner has to find his heart and his will. Beatrix already knows hers, and she feels that they're being ignored. It's a great parallel. Braun's plan is to execute Garnet now that we have her eidolons. She's going to have her executed for stealing royal jewels. We saw the soldiers and the mages leave via the pods for Alexandria, so we figure, what the hell? Let's do the same thing. So we jump in and are hopefully getting teleported back there.
Getting the gang back together. I love this. I'll take this next scene because I love this next scene. So we transition back to Marcus and Steiner, who are basically in a cage that is suspended from the ceiling by a gigantic chain. And I don't know. Something about seeing the two of them together in a cage is just I think is kind of funny and hilarious. And so we have a little mini game to try and break out of this cage where, we do the classic swing it back and forth cliche to try and basically slam the cage into the wall, which will break open the gate, and you can escape that way. And I noticed in here in your notes, you said you noted the infinite grind trick here, that Alexandrian guards will just keep coming literally forever until you climb up the one ladder that kind of like escape the dungeon area that you're in. So it's very useful to get a couple of levels there because the guards aren't too difficult there.
And because Marcus's level scaling does scale with another character that we get later.
Oh, really? Yes. I was not aware of that. Okay, so that would be useful to do that then. So once they escape, Marcus and Steiner Marcus kind of breaks away. He's just like, listen, I'm done here. My goal is to go get blank. We're gonna go off and kind of do that. And like you said, wouldn't you know it? Once Marcus leaves and Steiner makes his way up, it just luck of the plot. Thank God, Zidane and everybody teleports right beside Steiner, and he escaped from prison. He's shook. He probably didn't expect to ever see any of them ever again. And they let him know that Braun is on our way back, and Garnet is gonna be executed, and we only have 30 minutes to find her, and we get an in-game timer that does pop up. Although, again, as you noted, 30 minutes is a lot of time in this scenario. Alexandria Castle's not that big, and even with multiple guard fights, if you fight them, there's almost no possible way that I could think of to fail this.
It's really generous. It didn't even take me 10 minutes to get to where we needed to go. There's an optional boss that you can fight here in the library called Tantarian, but it's not really advisable because it is pretty strong at this point in the game, and you do have a time limit. So it's possible, but I mean, you would really be stretching that time limit.
I'll be honest, I did not, again, something else I learned doing this series, I was not aware of that because I never spent the time to explore. I was just beelined straight for Garnet. Amazing.
Yeah. You can, it's easiest to fight this boss when we return to Alexandria later. Then it's not nearly as difficult. Still difficult, but not nearly as difficult.
Okay, so it can be accessed like any time at this point then. Okay, very cool. Wow.
Yes, well, not after the next time we go to Alexandria.
Well, you're right, yeah. You're right.
But after looking around outside in the undergrounds of the castle, we find Garnet still in the room in which Zorn and Thorn extracted her eidolons, and we get into a boss fight with them.
Yes.
Not difficult at all. The way it works is they can only attack whenever the other one takes a move to give them power. And if you hit that one before they can use their attack, the move automatically fails.
Right.
And what's even more is the battle ends when one of them runs out of HP. You don't even have to beat them both. And one of them has like literally half HP of the other. I don't remember which is which, but
right.
Yeah, this is not a difficult fight at all.
No, not at all.
This whole game, to be perfectly honest with you, outside of the super bosses, it's not that difficult. It's one of the easier Final Fantasies.
It just feels like because of the long intro sequence of some of the fights, it just, the bosses feel and stuff that the fights feel like they take a long time. So it's more like the illusion of difficulty by just the fights kind of take up your time just because of how slow they are. If you're just playing it straight out of the box and not using any kind of mods or speeding it up or anything like that. So yeah, it's one of the easier Final Fantasies for sure.
So Garnet is out cold and Steiner is in hysterics. He can't accept anything that's what's going on. Zidane and Freya, they have their wits about them. They realize Garnet's not dead.
Yeah.
We pick her up to get out of there, but Beatrix cuts us off, and we get into yet another unwinnable fight with her. But after the fight, she turns and notices Garnet laying there unconscious. And we explain to her what happens, and she says, "So it was true. Steiner, it is time for you to accept the truth. My heart is set. All this time, I've been mistaken." I do love this part. She even goes so far as to ask Freya, like, on the spot for forgiveness. And Freya's like, "No, it's too late for that."
Yeah.
Like, you don't get forgiveness. You can, and to be fair, and this is a criticism I've seen levied before, Beatrix has committed war crimes.
Yes.
I am sympathetic towards her because I like her character arc, but I mean, if you want to be that guy about it, you know, that guy on Twitter about it, she has committed war crimes.
Right.
So,
but that's where that's where kind of the morality gray area that both her and Steiner struggle with come in, right? It's like she just thought she was, following orders, right? But we come to find that her kind of moral compass is a little more developed than Steiner's is, and it takes a lot less convincing for her to be like, "No, this is absolutely not the right thing I'm doing. Like, I need to stop and do this and protect Garnet." So, and Freya's reaction is understandable too. You can't just expect her to forgive the person who was one of the key architects of basically her entire civilization's destruction at this point. So, right. Yeah, it's understandable.
But Beatrix does resolve to protect Garnet at this point, and because she's also a skilled mage, she revives her on the spot.
She's technically the paladin class, right?
Yes.
Would that be? Yes.
Yeah. Braun walks in at this point, and she confirms with Zorn and Thorn that all of the Eidolons are extracted. So she says, "All right, throw Garnet in jail," and leaves. So Freya and Beatrix are going to stay behind to fend off Zorn and Thorn, while the rest of us run off. Steiner, this is really cool. He has a moment of clarity as we're running through the undergrounds, and he turns around and
just stops as you're escaping and just kind of does his like signature head tilt towards the sky and is just like, "I need to go back and help." Which, by the way, after everything that happened, like for Freya to step up and help Beatrix, like I fucking love that. That moment gets me so hyped. Like every time I play it, I'm like, fuck yes, let's go. Let's do it. It's so awesome.
Yeah, this whole sequence, we're finding allies in the most unexpected places.
Right.
And it's terrific. And Steiner's joining them. He has that moment of, I know what I have to do.
Everybody gets on the same page, like at the same time, and is like, "Listen, we can work out the details later. We need to get Garnet out of here. That's the main priority."
Right.
Oh, it's so good.
I know, dude. It's so good.
It gets me so excited.
As Zidane and the rest of the crew are running, though, they get caught in the same trap that Steiner and Marcus did earlier. But luckily for us, Zorn and Thorn will appear up top, and they say, they're gloating. But from behind them, Marcus comes out and knocks out Zorn or Thorn. I don't really know. It doesn't really matter.
One of the Orns.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the jesters. One of those little fucks.
Yeah.
And then the other one gets knocked out by Blank.
Our boy's back.
He's back.
Let's go.
And Zidane is like, "Holy shit, like Blank." But there's no time. Like, like there's no time for...
Which, by the way, like that, it happening in that moment you see Blank it's such a great payoff for that kind of side arc. And you're just like, oh, I like wonder what happened to Marcus. And it's just such a great payoff for it to happen at that moment. It's so good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, audience. You're going to hear me say it's so good like 47 more times in this entire series because it is so good. Just go. If you haven't played it yet, go and play it.
I mean, look, what this podcast never was a cold analytical series, like don't get me wrong. I I think that I'm better than the average podcaster at doing at analyzing games, right? But
1,000% yes.
Well, stop it. What I don't want to do though is like take the humanity out of it, you know?
Right.
Like I'm over 200 hours, well over 200 hours in this game, and I still get so excited throughout all of these. Like it's still just so good, like you said. And I don't want to take that away just like to be like, oh, well, Beatrix committed war crimes. It's like, no, dude, her arc is still really fucking moving. Be a human. Like get off Twitter for once. God damn
it. We'll never get off Twitter.
Genuinely, though, I never will because the shit posts are
too good.
Incredible. Marcus and Blank, they put us onto a Gargant and they say, get out of here. There's another boss fight with the same creature that that stopped the Gargant before, more or less the same thing. And what ends up happening is this Gargant gets a little bit out of control because that creature after the boss fight chases us. The Gargant goes a little crazy because remember, it's an animal, and misses the Traino stop and crashes into this sort of valley area called Pinnacle Rocks. This is a section of the game that I find perplexing, and I think it's a pace killer. I don't like this section.
Yeah, it's really kind of... It is one of the more strangely placed things because just in terms of, I think, Garnet as a character, because Garnet just went through a lot. She had her summoning power that she didn't even really understand or know that she had extracted from her, and then she found out that her mother was going to execute her, and then all of her friends basically like banded together to help her escape her childhood home. And now all of a sudden, like it says here, the next part of the story, once you awaken from the crash, you're greeted by Rama, or Ramu, or however you want to say it.
So I pronounced it Rama all my life, but now that I can read Japanese, it should be pronounced Ramu, which I still think is weird.
Right.
But,
I got the Midwest
I'm going to be that
accent.
guy on Twitter that's like, well, actually, the Japanese katakana would be.
Listen, I've got the Midwest vowel pronunciation accent, so I always just said Rama, just because that's how I was raised. Yeah. But semantics aside, Thunder Eidolon, and like you said, you get the story here where like Garnet is trying to like all of a sudden like come to terms with her summoning power, where it's just like she's super traumatized, and now it's very weird pacing. Am I kind of on the same page as you? Are our thoughts kind of aligned on that, or?
More or less, yeah.
Okay.
What's happening here is this. Rama appears here, and, he realizes that, and he explains that, your Eidolons did this destruction. Like, this is on you. And she's like, no, I don't want them to be destructive. I want to control it. And he says, I will be your Eidolon. I will let you be my new master if you prove yourself. So he hides 5 manifestations of himself around this area, and they all tell this little tale, that lightly parallels Garnet's feelings about Alexandria and why she's on this journey. We have to tell it to him in order. This whole section is just to emphasize that Garnet isn't afraid of her powers anymore, but it doesn't feel earned to me. Mm-hmm. It just, like you said, we just witnessed an entire civilization, or not civilization, but like an entire race of people wiped out by an analogy of weapons of mass destruction. And now, because we told a story about an army, we're suddenly okay with everything. Like, this feels profoundly unearned. It doesn't go well with the whole idea of this being an analogy to weapons of mass destructions. And I don't think she's really thought any deeper about this that we've seen, other than we can't let Queen Braun get away with this.
Well, when she had the time to think about it, because literally we crash and then this happens, like no time at all has passed between us escaping Alexandria and this moment, really. Like, it happens truly in gameplay right after this, so there's not really any time for her to kind of come to terms with it. And you're right, the weapons of mass destruction allegory here really kind of clashes with Garnet's story arc and her need to kind of accept that this is a part of her. And it all happens very suddenly. Like maybe if this happened like later in the game, or maybe if this happened like once we got to, not spoilers ahead, but once we get to, the outer continent and we get to Madain Sari, it might have fit in more naturally there. But yeah, this is not a great spot for this part of the story.
And afterwards, too, Vivi will say something to the effect of, I get the impression he would have become her eidolon either way. And Rama is like, yes, that's true.
Yeah, so basically the story that you tell, that you put together for him has like two endings, and it doesn't matter like which ending you pick or how you interpret the story. Like you get Ramu anyways. So
before we continue the story, we get a little aside of Queen Braun hiring 2 bandits / assassins to retrieve the jewel that Garnet took. Braun is not concerned about the safety of anybody else. She's like, just get that jewel. And she tells the redheaded assassin, if you take care of the monkey that's with them, I'll double your pay, or something like that.
She had a little bit of Frieza coming out there.
Oh God, yeah. I love that arc in DPC. There's a redheaded assassin that we're gonna see much more of later, and a woman carrying a large axe. So put that in your back pocket. So since Lindblom is in the distance, that's where we're going. But Braun's fleet, the Red Rose fleet, comes in at the same time. They begin to attack Lindblom. Cannons fire into the city's walls. Mages storm the streets to set fire to everything in their path. And without hesitation, Braun summons yet another eidolon, this time a Tomos, which is essentially a giant gaping mouth that becomes this vortex or a black hole. It creates massive suction, sucking in debris, entire buildings, mages, and citizens into its giant mouth with great force. This effectively destroys Lindblom and leaves it in ruins. Once again, I mean, this kind of betrays the whole preceding thing as far as I'm concerned. Like, once again, we're seeing that eidolons are destructive. And Garnet has not taken the time to make the previous scene worthwhile. It just, maybe that previous scene with Rama should have taken place later in the story or something. Or at least we should have seen Garnet think about this some more. But yeah. I don't know. I think we're being asked as players or viewers to do a little bit too much extra footwork to just believe that Garnet has come around to this. I don't know. That's
might
just
be
my thoughts.
A gameplay thing too, because part of Garnet's kit as her white mage classes, she has the ability to summon, and they obviously want you to be able to use that in combat if you want to. So because at this point, if we push it off any longer, we're gonna get to like the middle end of disc 2, and that's half the game. You haven't been able to use a significant portion of what Garnet's powers are supposed to be, maybe, but that's not a good justification for it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that is fair. It's just diegetically, it just doesn't work. You get to, we're going to walk through Lindblom after this as it's in ruins, and if you talk to the NPCs, it shows the extent of this damage. One man watched his only son get killed. One toddler, her parents are missing, and she's just waiting in the square wondering where they are. An old woman that looks like the pickle woman, but it's not her. It's not Pickle Grandma. She's not named that. So my headcanon, she's okay. There's an old woman who says, who's there? I was blinded by these mages, and I'll never see my, she's like, I'll never see my newborn grandchild's face.
Awful.
And even you could talk to the Alexandrian soldiers, and about half of them will remark, like, these powers are not of this world. This is out of control. Like, one of them says, I think we've opened Pandora's box here.
Right.
So it's insane. They've obviously, Alexandria has seized the whole city. They've seized the harbor, so no ships can go. They seized the unfinished airship that can run without mist. They've also taken the royal pendant, the Falcon's Claw.
Mm-hmm.
I think at this point, knowing that Garnet is related to Sid, we can reasonably assume that the Falcon's Claw contains an eidolon, right?
Yep. And it seems to be Braun's primary purpose, besides death and destruction, to get all of these jewels together so something can happen.
Right. Braun at this point is a super, like a comic book villain. She just wants power.
Right.
The difference is there's a reason for it. I don't know if we'll get to it today, but we'll talk about it.
Right.
Artania will take us to Sid. The castle was spared, so Bron is playing by some sort of rules here, and he gives us some intel. He says that Kuja was the man that was supplying the magical weapons, aka the Black Mages, to Queen Bron. Challenging her right now would be futile, but if we were able to take out the arms dealer, Kuja, we might stand a chance to make a counter move. It's suspected that Kuja is from this place called the Outer Continent, a mostly unexplored continent where mist does not populate. Obviously, because Alexandria has seized the harbor and everything, it's a bit of an issue of how we're going to get to there at the moment. So Sid suggests going to a nearby excavation site that's rumored to have a path to the Outer Continent.
And I think it's a good time to kind of unveil this information to us, right? Because we've run into Kuja twice now, 3 times if you get the ATE event at Treno, and you can see him at the auction house, very briefly. And you know, our focus so far in the game has been on Queen Bron and Alexandria, but and we know Kuja's in there to some capacity, but now we really get his kind of connection and start lining up the dots as to like what his connection is to all of this death and chaos, despite the fact that we don't really know why he's doing this or to what ends that he's trying to do this. But now it kind of shifts the focus from Queen Bron to, hey, it doesn't matter if we stop Bron. If Kuja's not stopped, you know, the chaos and death will continue. So I think this is a good point to kind of drop this and start shifting the focus to what will eventually become the main antagonist.
So we've got to find this excavation site to get into the Outer Continent. This excavation site is accessed through Kuz Marsh. I don't remember. Do you remember how we were directed to Kuz Marsh? I genuinely do not.
Yeah, actually, yes, I do. And I did want to mention one part before this where God bless Sid the Oglop. He's one of my favorite Sids of all time because he starts to employ some like shenanigans as to like get us. Oh, no, that comes afterwards, doesn't it? Oh, no, it doesn't. Because he pulls some shenanigans where like we need to get out the back gate and go and find the excavation site. And he like crashes one of the carts to like the gate, like in between, and to like delay the Alexandrian soldiers. And they're just like tired of this ruler who's an Oglop, like running around like fucking with them, basically. And that's like one of my favorite parts of the game. But when we go into Kuz Marsh, I think when you go like past the frogs and into like the tall weeds or whatever, there's a portion where you enter where like Quina will smell something and they'll just kind of run off, and Zidane will be like, what the fuck? We're like, we need to figure it out. And they'll unintentionally lead you to the excavation site because they smell like frogs or something coming from the excavation site.
Yes. Well, yes, that is true. So yes. That's at the beginning when I said that I thought Quina was optional. That's why Quina is not, because Quina leads you to the excavation site.
Yes.
But what I was asking was, how did we know to get to Kuz Marsh? Is it because it's just the only thing that's here?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, I think the game wants you to kind of connect the dots in that, because they're like, oh, it's somewhere a little ways away, and really the only other thing in that direction that's sending you to go is like, I think the only other place you can go is the Chocobo Forest or Gizmaluk's Grotto. So okay. I would assume just kind of like by process of elimination, you would stumble across it. I would think that's the only way, because it doesn't very distinctly tell you it's in the marsh. It's just kind of tells you, oh, it's to kind of like to the east of here or west of here, or wherever direction it is. So
you know what this tells me? This tells me that I've been poisoned by modern gaming and that I need to be told where to go.
That's kind of what I thought too. I was just like, oh, there's no like marker telling me where it is. So yeah, thanks modern gaming for ruining us.
Oh, the waypoint marks. So yes, Quina will lead us to the excavation site because she really wants a frog. If you're a cool customer like me, you're going to do some frog catching in this marsh.
You always do frog catching before you move on. If there's the opportunity to catch frogs, you catch frogs.
And just a little note about frog catching for all you freaky little froggies out there. The pro tip, whenever you're in a marsh, you don't want to catch every frog. You want to leave a male frog and a female frog. Mm-hmm. And they look different, so you can tell. And if there's a golden frog, you do not want to catch that thing, because that will speed up the reproductive process of the male and the female frogs. I guess he just chills and watches and they're into that or something. I don't know how it works, but it does. You never want to catch them all because then they reproduce more slowly, and it just wastes a lot of time.
Man, Rick, now I'm thinking about the process of like frog cucking in Final Fantasy IX. That's great.
Can I insert the froggy feeling froggy jingle here? Will I get in trouble for that?
No, I don't think so. It's your show.
Yes, but Quina leads us to the excavation site, which is called Fossil Rue. It's kind of similar to Gargant Rue. It doesn't have as good of music, but it's this underground series of tunnels that does have gargants. These gargants are wild, but not tamed like Sid's, but they are here. At first, though, we're in this narrow corridor, and we get chased pretty quickly by this demon chariot called, oh geez, I didn't practice this one, Armadulahan.
I love that you wrote down the notes because I was like, oh dear.
Yeah, Armadulahan. This is exactly like the mech spider fight in Final Fantasy VIII. Mm-hmm. We have to run away from this thing, and if it catches us, we get into a fight with it, and then we have to kind of beat it until it's done, and then it'll just chase us again. Yeah. The difference here is that we're running across... This is like straight out of like an Indiana Jones movie or like a PS1 platformer. We're running across bridges that have swinging axes just out of nowhere.
It's great.
You don't even have to fight it though. Like you can run away from it without it catching you.
The annoying thing if you do get into a fight with it though, I think it knows the spell Death, which will just instantly like kill one of your party members. So that's like kind of annoying.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
It eventually falls through a gap in one of the bridges because it can't jump. So we're safe. But this takes us into this room where that female bounty hunter comes out. Mm-hmm. Her name is Lonnie, the bounty hunter with an axe. Zidane immediately hits on her, which I think is fucking great. And Garnet's like, what are you doing? Stop it.
True to his character, it's almost like a reflex for him at this point.
I love it. She is no nonsense though. She's like, I'm here to get the jewel. Your safety is not part of my orders. And we start talking because we're a JRPG party, and she's like, enough of this shit. Give me the jewel, or we're gonna have a problem. And this leads us into a boss fight with her. It's not crazy difficult. I mean, she's kind of strong, but it's not too difficult. And when we beat her, she kind of says, all right, I'll be back. Mm-hmm. And she leaves for now. But this is where we're going to navigate Fossil Rue on all of the Gargants. I don't really have much to say about Fossil Rue. It's just an underground system with Gargants, Oh, there's a little excavation mini game here where you can get a pickaxe and do some mining. There's a Moogle hidden in one of the walls where you can start mining these very suspiciously looking loose rocks. And as you hit it with your pick, you hear a little thing go, Koopo. And then you hit it again, and it's like, Koopo. And it just fucking flies out. He's just chilling. I love it.
I love the mischievous. They get into so much shenanigans in this game specifically. Like one is frozen solid, one's trapped under a bell, one is trapped in the wall of a mine. It's just like, how did they get themselves, those crazy little guys, how do they get themselves in these situations?
Yeah. And just for the record, I am doing the Magnet quest to completion. Like I've never actually, the last time I did it, I missed one.
Okay.
Oh, I missed one. I was so close. But and some of them are missable, just so everybody out there knows.
Yes.
So I'm doing it to completion this time. Yeah. And I think this little dude in the wall had a letter that he wanted to mail. Awful. I don't know what, if we wouldn't have come along, I don't know what he would have done, but
right. In terms of like Fossil Rue though, this isn't one of my favorite parts of the game. I don't know. I don't like the whole mechanic of, it's not that it's annoying. And maybe just this playthrough and this is modern gaming ruining everything for me. I just didn't like you had to kind of guesstimate and turn on the water switches, which would make the Gargant go one way or the other. And I didn't particularly enjoy navigating Fossil Rue. I just didn't like it this time. I don't know. It's not one of my favorite parts of the game.
It's not difficult, but it is a little tedious. It's one of those things where, you've got a track switcher, right? If you're going from A to B, you can hit the switch and go from A to C. The difficulty here is that there are two of them, so you get a little bit more variables. But all in all, like it's really just trial and error. It's not a big deal. But we navigate through, we get through it, and we are now officially on the outer continent completely free of mist.
Worth noting, definitely.
We stop at the first place we find. I fucking love this place,
even
though it doesn't play a huge role. Condapeti.
One of the best towns ever.
Condapeti is this little stone town that's built on a giant bridge of tree roots. More about that pretty soon. But it is, it's a stone town. It's built on these tree roots, and it is inhabited entirely by dwarves that speak in aggressive Scottish accents.
It's so good.
We don't stay in here for too long this first time. When we enter, they're like rally ho, and you have to do the rally ho greeting, or they won't let you in.
Which is now how I'm going to greet everybody. Like, walk into a business meeting, rally ho.
It's so good, dude. And all of their last names, when you talk to them, are directly related to what they do. Like the Pope's name, there's a dwarf Pope, by the way. The dwarf Pope's name is David Heavengard. And the watchmen's name are like Brian Townwatcher or something like that. It's really funny.
And to the point too of your like aggressive Scottish too, it's like, well, how would you know they're Scottish if it's text? Like the text is written in very aggressive Scottish accent, like you can tell.
Oh yeah, like Kenne, like Cannae is used. Ken, like Ken, is used like as a slang term for like knowing something.
Yeah.
I don't know, Ken, like I'm not going to even try and do it because I can't do a Scottish accent.
It's so funny though.
It's really good. Like it's so, I love this place, man. Yeah. We're not here for very long. We talk to all of the lovable little townsfolks. One of them's name is Brian Rootrunner, and if you talk to him, all he says is, if I could just live my life eating all day, I'd be a happy man. And I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. I agree with you so much. As we're walking around just learning about the dwarves, learning about their culture, a black mage comes in. They refer to them as the pinty hits, which again, I love. A black mage comes in to trade, like they trade goods between each other. When we approach him, he gets startled and he just runs away. He doesn't seem aggressive at all. We ask the dwarves, and they say, they live so deep in the forest that even owls didn't live there. If anybody clips that, I will lose my fucking mind. Don't clip that.
Very good attempt at a Scottish accent.
Hey man, do it. Yeah, what's your best Scottish dwarf?
I'm not going to.
You're not going to?
No, I refuse. I have one accent. It's Midwestern. That's it.
Damn. All right. So off we go. The Black Mage Villas, there is this huge forested little strait, I guess you could call it, valley next to Condapeti. And what the Black Mages have done is they not only live deep within the forest, but they have put up several optical illusions to keep themselves safe. Mm-hmm. And we have to go where the owls don't go. So we come to a fork in the road, and there's a sign, and it says to the left, owls live here. To the right, no owls live here. And what we have to do is we have to continually go down the path that says no owls, and it will change each time. The path will change. Instead of coming through the front, we might come through the back of the other path, but every time we have to go where the owls aren't. On the last one, we trail behind the mage that was running away from us. He lifts the illusion, and we're able to enter. And this is the small Black Mage village. Immediately, what you're going to notice here, if you're musically inclined, the Black Mage village theme is Vivi's theme.
Yes.
Which I love. It's Vivi's theme, but it's heavily synthesized. It's more groovy. There's a synth bass that is just going through the whole thing. The saw synth, I think it's a saw synth or maybe a triangle synth, is much more aggressive. It's not plucked strings like Vivi's, but it is Vivi's theme. Occasionally it's augmented. Occasionally it's altered a little bit, but it's the same theme. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to play them back to back. They behave and speak like regular people. And immediately when we walk in, they're like, humans are here, and they like run away. They are so terrified. But Vivi, this is so adorable. Vivi is so excited. He like looks around and he's like, they were talking. There are others like me. And he just runs off.
Right. Which you can understand, because the whole time that he's been journeying with Zidane, he's only seen other things like him kill and destroy. And now there are other ones here. Anytime he's tried to communicate with them, they haven't been responsive. And now here they are, able to talk, able to do things. They built a town. They're living a normal life.
Exactly. And this is another area where if you're going for all the ATEs, it can be tricky.
Yes.
You have to do them in a specific order. Also, I don't quite remember where this conversation takes place, so just to say it here, the reason these mages are this way is because a group of them just became aware. And this brushes up against more of the anti-war theme that's present in so many of Sakaguchi's works. One of the mages describes it. He said that he was on the battlefield and all of a sudden he was just awake. He said, do you remember the day you were born? And we were like, no. And he's like, well, it's kind of the same for us. Like, all of a sudden, I just looked down at my hands and I saw blood all over them and I got scared. I didn't know what to do. I didn't like it, so I ran away. And that's the long and short of it, is so many of them became aware that they started up this village to live in peace. They didn't want to be instruments of war. We get to explore here and show the villagers that we mean no harm. There's one shopkeeper. I love the shopkeeper, because he's like he's like studying how to be a shopkeeper. And he's like, well, it says here that if a customer asks for the usual, you give him the usual. And then he's like, what's the usual? And you can walk in and instead of selecting buy, sell, you can select give me the usual. And the practical reason for this is it gets him to move out of the way so he can collect a hidden treasure. But he walks into a corner and starts digging through stuff. And he's like, now where did I put the usual? It's so good. Yeah. We rest here at the end of the day, and we learn some important info relating to one of this game's biggest themes outside of life and death, the theme of home, or the theme of belonging. So the first little bit that we get is Zidane's backstory. He tells Garnet about his past in the form of a bedtime story at the end of the day. It's kind of cute. He's being vulnerable for the first time in a long time.
Right.
The gist of it is that he doesn't have a memory of his parents or his home or where he was born. Nothing. In a way, he's pretty similar to the mages. He was just aware one day. This is intentional. The only memory he has is that of a blue light. So he went searching for it, couldn't find it. Baku beat the hell out of him when he got back. That's kind of Baku's way of saying that he loves him. It's a whole deal. But that's the gist of Zidane. He doesn't know anything about where he's from, but he came to the conclusion that home is. I forget what he says. He says something to the effect of, "But I already had a home. It was right here with Baku, with Tantalus, with my friends."
Right.
It's very important to this game's theme. I mean, as strong as the theme of life and death are in this game, this notion of community and home, what is home, of belonging, that's very important to this game.
And this is a kind of a really important step in the development of the relationship between Zidane and Garnet too, because the whole game we've seen Zidane, his reaction to meeting any kind of girl or woman is the same. You know, he's always trying to be the smooth talker and flirtatious and, you know, just I guess putting on the riz, as the kids would say these days. But this is really the first time, and even sometimes too with in our ventures with Garnet, he acts that way towards her. But this is really like the first time, like, we see him grow throughout the first disc and up to this point. Don't get me wrong. Like he becomes this person who, you know, gets caught up in this war and is determined to help his friends. But this is the first time that we really see him in this vulnerable state. And it's really touching to see him open up to somebody that he's coming to care about more than just, like, you know, his flings or the people that he always flirts with. So it's a really, I love this scene a lot. It's so moving. And this is the perfect spot to do it too, because we get this, you know, big reveal towards Vivi, and while he's discovering things too, this gives, you know, Zidane and Garnet a little bit of time to kind of process what's going on and we're very clearly setting up for a big reveal about Vivi's story, but we also sneak in just a little bit about, Zidane just gets a little bit of growth here as a character during a moment that should be solely focused on Vivi. And it's, oh, man, fucking great story.
The reason that they get this moment alone is because at nighttime, Vivi decides to leave the inn and go and talk to some of the other mages. So it's about time that we talk about Vivi's arc here. This is
rough.
Rough is a word for it. It's a really well-known sequence in the game. This is told through a couple of disjointed's not the right word, interspersed cutscenes and ATEs. So at nighttime, Vivi goes back out to talk to this one mage that he met, number 288. That's his name. And we learn about their origins throughout these cutscenes. At a certain point, Vivi stumbles onto what looks like a cemetery. And there are two mages there. One's Mr. 56, number 56, and one is number 288. He explains, our friends are buried here. He refers to this act of dying as stopping. He says that our friends have stopped. I love this because, remember, I think I accidentally said Vivi is 6 in the previous episode. Vivi is 9. A lesser game would have explained death by flexing the writer's chops a little bit of a different way to right. They would have been talking to this kid like he was an adult, but they don't do that here. And it's brilliant because their audience that's playing the game is probably not Vivi's age, maybe Vivi's age at the very youngest, like I was, but it's also it's teens and young adults, but they're not talking to those teens, they're talking to Vivi. And so we get this explanation about life and death as if they're talking to a child, which they are. And I don't know that I have found another game that handles this concept of mortality like Final Fantasy IX does.
Yeah, and you have to think too that I have a hard time talking about this part because it is so emotional. They basically explain the concept of death as, because you have to think about these mages all of a sudden just came into being as these weapons of war, and one day they became self-aware and decided they not want to do this, and they're trying to figure out everything in life by themselves, just existing. They came into being not knowing basically anything, and now all of a sudden the earliest of them that have escaped, their friends have started stopping, and that's probably a really terrifying concept for these beings that were designed for war and are just trying to figure out what life is. And they react similarly to kind of how everybody reacts when they first understand, when you're first able at a young age to understand the concept of what dying is. It is the thing that ultimately connects all of us as human beings. We are born, we live this life, and at some point we have to give it back, and we have to not live that life anymore. And it is something that's terrifying, and it does terrify Vivi as well, because this is the first time that Vivi's kind of had to think about this concept, because he's similarly to the Black Mage is just trying to figure out life as well. And this part of the game always hits me really hard, and I think it's especially hit me hard in this last playthrough because, your audience knows my life is about to change so drastically, and I'm about to have a kid come into this world. And, I'm at the age now where over the past few years, some friends that I've gone to school with have passed away, and you start to feel a little bit, you start to think about mortality a little bit more as you get older, and contemplate the same questions that these Black Mages are now starting to contemplate. So this part of the game has always been very special to me, and very, it makes you think about something that you don't want to think about a lot.
It's interesting that you mentioned that the mages are thinking about this, because some of them are, like number 288.
Yeah.
But some of them still don't understand it. And number 256 that's here, or not 256, number 56 that's here, with 288 and Vivi, he says this: I came here with Mr. 36. We escaped together. We had so many things to learn. It was really scary at first, but we helped each other. Then one day, Mr. 36 stopped moving. He just stopped. Wouldn't move or say anything. My friend, who knows lots of things, told me that this was what death was and we had to bury him. Mr. 36 is buried under the ground now, but I don't understand why. He's going to come out again one day, right? When he does, I'm going to wash him off in the pond. It's so
innocent.
Yeah, it's that childish innocence and naivete. Like, Mr. 36 doesn't understand what happened. He knows that 36 is gone. He knows that he's buried under the ground. He knows that 36 isn't moving or talking, but the finality of life, this culmination in biological death, has not hit him yet. And in some ways, the biological aspect of death is the first hurdle to get over, the first really true hurdle to get over in a lot of people's lives as people and as children. Later on, it's a much more nuanced idea of this idea of the second way of dying when people forget about you, right? Like, that's different. But the physical, biological act of dying is something that's difficult to struggle, and they haven't quite, most of them here, haven't quite done that yet. In another cutscene later on, this idea is expanded upon later at night. Vivi and 288 meet alone. 288 tells them that, through observation and deduction, that their life expectancy is limited. He says it varies, but most die after 1 year past their production. And it's important to note here, according to, the Ultimania, the wiki, Vivi is canonically 9 years old, but he is only 6 months old in terms of production. He was produced 6 months ago. So this is, I don't know if Vivi knows this, it's unclear, but it's important to note. 288 goes on to say, I haven't told anyone this. This meaning, that their lifespan is limited. They would feel the same way I do. Vivi asks, what do you feel? And 288 replies, I don't know. Fear? I don't want to stop, and maybe I want to run away from it all. But living in the village with everyone fills me with joy. The joy of living with them far outweighs the fear of death. The listeners can't see, but I'm throwing my hands up. Like, there's so much to get into here.
Yeah.
Like, what angle? Do we talk about it, these effectively children, right? Because, they're classified, they are children insofar as they've been alive for like a year. They're obviously, their personalities develop quicker, but Vivi is an actual child. So we are seeing children come to terms with this idea of biological death. We're seeing them come to terms with the idea of what it means to live. What does life mean? Where is the value in life? I don't know about you, man, but I think about this all the time. Like, what is the meaning? What is the meaning of life? Everybody thinks about that. It's not deep to talk about that anymore, right? It's 2024. We're not stoned at Denny's. We're not, thinking about like, what's the meaning of life, man? But like, it's less about what is the meaning of life, but what makes life worth living. And I think about this a lot. I'm not trying to get into my own personal demons or insecurities, but I spent over a decade dedicated to one thing. My identity was one thing. My self-worth was one thing. My training, my education, everything was one thing. And then I left that thing. Combination of a personal decision and, the general state of higher education and the economy, as well as a sort of injury that I developed, which I'm not going to get into any of that. But the long and short of it is I left that. And suddenly I was asking myself, what does it mean to live? It's really easy to say things like, oh, well, I've got friends, but it's another thing to actually grapple with it and say, do I believe that? Do I believe what I'm saying, that friends are the reason to live? When you're faced with something that rips away all that you've ever known, how do you live? And Vivi is going through this at 9 years old.
I don't think you should feel any type of way of thinking that, because I think I feel the same way as well, because I didn't spend a decade of my life devoting myself to a craft or anything like that. I spent a decade of my life lost, not knowing if the decisions that I made mattered, losing a person that I was convinced that I would spend the rest of my life with devastated me. And for that decade of life, all I felt was pain and confusion. And so I've just started to come to terms with that kind of pain and with that kind of those questions, right? It's like over a third of my life was spent almost to the point of misery. And it's just like, what is kind of the point of that? Now I'm trying to figure it out, in 4 years, my life drastically changed to where I'm at the threshold of having my own family and having bringing my own child into this world. And I'm trying to, in that time before he comes, answer the same question. What does it mean to live? Why is this hours that I spend on playing games or doing this podcast or with friends at the end of the day? Does that mean anything in a universe in which we are infinitesimally small in the grand scheme of things? And this is a game that I cling to with all my heart, and this moment specifically is basically the defining moment of why I sit here and say, I love video games. It's because of this specific moment in this game right here that asks you and makes you experience these questions that are some of the most difficult questions you will ever grapple with in your entire life. That's why this moment right here is why this game means so much to me. And the way in which this game expands upon this, and we see Vivi's journey to accept this and answer these questions that we're asking right now on your podcast, in stark contrast to the way that other people deal with this question of life and death, is we're both sitting here on your show like almost on the verge of tears because of how much this means to us. I mean, yeah.
Oh, I've cried several times already. I mean, the audience doesn't know, but you don't have to. You don't have to save my ass, man.
Anybody that sits here and, my whole life, people have told me that video games are a waste of my time, and this is the moment that I tell people about, or I show people to say, this is more than just moving something on a screen or watching television. Like it means something, and it's defined a large part of who I am is this moment right here.
And that's not to devalue things like the writing of television.
No,
or
not at all.
Obviously books, but think about it this way. Games as a medium. This was released, at the end of 2001, right?
2001, yeah, one of them.
Or is it 2000, 2001, 2002? Shit. Looks like I'm not a super fan. But it was, early 2000s, right? You go 2 decades, 20 years prior to this, and video games were not really a thing.
No.
You go 15 years before this, and video games with a written story were not really a thing. The first video games, the story was Mario needs to save Princess Toadstool from Bowser. Or if you're playing the Game Boy version like I am, Daisy from whatever that alien in that spaceship is. Weird Super Mario Land 1.
Yep.
And this, in not even 2 decades' time, the writing in games have come so far that we're now examining existential human questions that don't have a fundamental answer. Anybody that tells you they know the reason to live is lying to you. That is not an answer that we are able to know. But this game has the confidence, yes, but also the tenderness to address it. And it doesn't try and talk to you like you're a 20-year-old playing a game. It doesn't. It's pulling the Mr. Rogers approach. It's getting down on one knee and it's saying, there are things that we don't know. And that's all right. That's part of the journey, is figuring this out for yourself. And it sucks and it's scary. But it's worth it. All right.
I think we've recomposed ourselves, man. That was I think the people saw us coming to terms with some stuff right on air there, Rick. I think honestly, if you can't be vulnerable doing this type of thing, then people aren't going to be able to connect with you, and that's kind of the whole point. So
exactly.
I hope us wearing our hearts on our sleeves for this episode connected with some people. And if you don't take anything away from this series of episodes or anything, take away this, that you can take things from this medium and be inspired by them, and they can encourage you to think about things in a certain way, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So we probably need to move on with the story, though, and end this little therapy session.
I'm glad you're here, man.
I'm glad I'm here too, man. I wouldn't rather have done this with anyone else, so I appreciate it.
The following day, Garnet learns from one of the mages that Kuja was actually around here, and it's said that the origin of the mist and a secret is hidden on this continent. That's all the mages know. And that Kuja was seen beyond Kondapeti's sanctuary riding his dragon, his silver dragon. So we've got to double back there. For a moment, like the gang debates, they're like, maybe we should let Vivi stay here,
right?
Because he seems happy. He's with people, and Vivi comes running in here like a little kid that's just so excited. And he's like, no, I want to come because, quote, my friends asked me to see new places and tell them about it. Which, knowing what we know now, that's my only note there is fucking ouch.
Devastating.
But good news, we get some levity here because we're going back to Kondapeti, and I fucking love Kondapeti. Something that we didn't mention earlier is if you talk to the NPCs, they talk about the sanctuary. And it's this huge tree in the distance, and their process in their culture is that nobody can leave the village until they get married, the dwarves, that is. And their rite of passage is to go to the sanctuary, carve their initials on the roots of the tree, and then come back. They're not letting us leave either, at least to go towards the sanctuary, I should say, because, it's their tradition. So, Zidane kind of like gets this like little wink and a nod. He's like, hey, Garnet, you think we can get... And then immediately she's like, yes, let's do it. And he's like, wait, what? And the whole time he's
stunned.
He's freaking out. And Garnet's like, no, like we should do this. This is the only way through. Let's do it. And Zidane's like, oh my God. I mean, does she know marriage? Like she's a princess. And then he's like, but then again, that night in the hotel or in the inn, I was pretty deep. I'm such a stud. He's like, it's so funny. But they get married by Dwarf Pope David Heavengard. And that's it. Now they can leave. Vivi and Quina are like, what are we supposed to do? And I don't know, because I've never chosen the other option, but you can say, why don't you guys get married? And Vivi and Quina do. They get married too.
Yeah.
And it's so fucking funny because it's like, I think Quina turns to Vivi and just goes, so happy.
Yep. like literally, so you get to see both of the wedding scenes play out, and Zidane has this inner monologue like the whole time while the dwarf pope is reading the ceremony to him. And when you see Vivi and Quina go through it, their inner dialogue is just like ellipses, like they're not saying anything, and the only thing that gets said is when Quina turns to him and says, "I so happy." It's so funny.
And he's like, me too.
Yeah.
It's really good. But this will now allow us to go through to the sanctuary. Another thing that we didn't mention is some of the dwarfs were talking about a thief in their village. Somebody keeps stealing their food. And we see that happen here. There's this young girl with purple hair being tailed by a Moogle with a yellow pom-pom. That's interesting. That's stole their food. We see it happen. And as we're leaving, we bump into this thief. This little girl got caught, got her dress, shirt caught on a branch when she was trying to jump over it. She's dangling there. She's calling for help. We stumble upon that scene. She's like asking for help, and Quina jumps down because Quina saw the Moogle, and they were like, "Ooh, look tasty!" And then they chase the Moogle. The joke is that Quina is a very rotund character, so when they jumped down, it kind of shook everything, and this little girl fell off. So she's safe now. This is Aiko. Pretty sure it's pronounced Aiko, but I've said Aiko for a billion years.
Same.
Aiko Carroll. This is our newest party member. another white mage. This is something really cool that FF9 does. Is it goes back to Final Fantasy 1, where classes would evolve into new classes. I don't know any off the top of my head because I'm blanking, but I think, isn't it like Thief evolves into Monk or Thief into Ninja? That's what it was.
I think the fighter like becomes Knight, right? I think something like
yes.
that.
Yeah, I think so. But the distinction here is that Garnet is a summoner class, which means summons first and white magic second. Aiko is a white mage true. So she has more of the useful white magic skills and less of the offensive summon abilities. In fact, most of her summons do buffs and debuffs.
Right.
Which do you prefer? Do you prefer Aiko or Garnet?
I think
as a fighter, like as a party member.
Yeah, I think what I normally end up leaning towards almost every playthrough, because I have no originality, is I really like to go into the end of the game and do like, I normally roll with like the original four. So I normally would roll with Zidane, Garnet, Vivi, and Steiner. Mostly just because of like, that's who I have like the most experience playing with. So I tend to lean towards Garnet just because I think just out of habit. It's nothing against Aiko. I do know that Aiko is very, very useful in certain situations where buffing and debuffing is a really viable strategy. I think even when you fight the super boss too, I think Aiko's even a more preferred, because for that very reason. So she definitely has a lot more utility, I think, as a healer and as a buffer debuffer than Garnet does. But I normally just tend to go with the core four, as I call them, for most of the playthrough.
Yeah, Aiko is going to have more buffing, white magic, access to that quicker. I'm pretty sure Aiko either is the only one that can learn the spell Holy or learns it significantly quicker than Garnet does. That being said, Garnet can also summon Alexander, so there is that.
True.
But Aiko is she's a 6-year-old girl, and she is a firecracker. She's really rambunctious. She immediately starts flirting with Zidane, like in the way that like young girls flirt with like older guys. Like friend of the show Colby Moyer is a very good-looking guy, and he's a teacher, just finished student teaching, and he's teaching for real now. And people who have student taught go through this all the time. Like the little kids kind of flirt with you in an innocent way. It's nothing weird or creepy until the teacher makes it weird or creepy. But and Colby obviously didn't. It's weird to talk about that now because his students just found his podcast today.
Oh, they did? Oh, no.
Yeah.
It's over.
But it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
You see like an older person and you're just, you're enamored with them. And Aiko is that way with Zidane pretty quickly. She's also very quick to point out that Vivi's just a kid and like, don't tell me what to do. And Vivi's like, we're like the same age, dude.
Yeah, right.
But what happens here is Aiko explains like, yeah, like I was stealing because I'm hungry. Like I live alone. I live all by myself in this place that's just right through here. And when she hears that we want to go to Sanctuary, she's like, oh, I know where that's at. Its proper name is the Aoife tree. We'll talk about that in the next episode. But she's like, I could take you there. Follow me. And that's, I think, where we're going to end the episode today.
Yeah.
We'll pick it up next time where Aiko takes us to her place, her town, her place of residence, go to the Aoife tree, which is what the dwarves call Sanctuary, and we'll pick it up there. I made a little note in the episode at the top of it that we decided to do 5 parts now. Part 4 will be next, and then part 5, because that's how numbers work. And the game is going to get even more intense in the next episode, so it's going to be a lot of fun.
Whew.
Yeah, this was a heavy one, man. This game does not pull its punches.
No, but I love that we got to this part. It's one of my favorite parts, and it really highlights the strength of this game and why I love it so much. So I'm glad it's heavy. I'm glad we were vulnerable. I'm glad about all that. It was a great episode.
There's some heaviness in other games too. Like 10 gets brought up a lot, and I love 10. Don't get me wrong, 10 is a masterpiece. But I just and I know what everyone's gonna say. Well, this is the first Final Fantasy you ever played. I know, but I've gone back and played through all of them, and I still just think this is just the best one. Like 6 gets into some really intense emotional shit. Like Chris and I cried on the podcast when we did that. But 9 just takes it to a new level. And it's because, I think it's because Sakaguchi knew, like, this is the last one that he and Uematsu are working on. This is the last one on the PS1. This is the last single-digit entry. And they just said, this is our baby.
Yeah.
And they accomplished something amazing here. I love this game to death. I can't wait to get... We're coming up on one of my favorite scenes in the entire game with 2 unlikely comrades in arms.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't wait to get to it. I can't wait to get to it. One of my favorite uses of music in this game, too. But for now, this is where we're going to stop. Once again, everybody, if you're listening, thank you so much for sticking around, especially through this series. I know it's going to be long. As we mentioned last time, Unlockables Podcast. We did do the self-plugs last time, right?
I think so, yeah.
It's been a minute. I'm blanking. But if we didn't, check out the Unlockables Podcast. It is hosted by Eric. Currently, he is going through every Kingdom Hearts title known to man. So if you are one of those people that thinks that Kingdom Hearts is just too damn complicated, I mean, you may or may not be right. That's not the issue here. But Eric breaks it down adeptly. I am actually re-listening to an episode now because I am going through Kingdom Hearts 2. And even though I have played 358 over 2 days, I need a refresher. So I'm listening to that now. It's very approachable. It's scripted. Well, I mean, is it hard scripted? Do you follow a script or do you go off script? It sounds like it's scripted.
So there are certain portions that are scripted. Just the nature of Days as a story, I decided to script it just because it happens in days, and I was just like, it's kind of boring me just being like, and then on this day this happened, and then on this day this happened. So this one I scripted. Some of the other ones I kind of do like a bullet point outline of the plot points and just kind of freewheel it from there. So it's a little bit of both, just kind of depending on the flavor of the game.
And on the 3rd day, Nomura rose again. It's really good stuff. Check out the Unlockables Podcast. There's also a backlog where Eric interviews other podcasters, where Eric talks about other games like Super Advance Wars Reboot 1 and 2. Final Fantasy 16 was another one that he did a whole episode on. Even an episode talking about the conflict in Ukraine, which was, I don't want to say out of left field because it was when that first started happening, but it was a departure from the form, and it was really well handled, I thought. So there's just a lot of great stuff on the Unlockables Podcast to check out, and I highly recommend it. And you can find all of those links in the episode description. You'll find where you can hang out with Eric on socials, follow him on Instagram and Twitter, join the Discord, all of that good stuff.
If you're listening, join the Pixel Project Discord. It's one of the best communities on the internet, hands down.
Yes, I wasn't going to go heavy on the self-promo here for me, but thank you, Eric. I appreciate you. You can also find our links in the description as well. Listen to any other episode. You can hear me show for them a little bit harder, but you've got the Discord, Patreon, Blue Sky, Discord. I said Discord twice. So nice that I said it twice. You can find all of that in the episode description. So check that out. Check out Eric's show. It's extremely good. And yeah, for now, I think we all need a little bit of a breather so we can process everything. And we will return next time to learn more about this little rambunctious girl, Aiko. So thanks everybody for stopping by. My name is Rick. I am your host. We're signing off for now. Take care.